When Maura Murray disappeared in 2004, most people got their news from television and newspapers. Today, her case is discussed daily through Reddit, TikTok podcasts, YouTube channels, not much different than my own, with some dedicated entirely to solving her disappearance. Like a digital ghost, Maura haunts our collective imagination through strange, compelling details. The bus driver who saw her minutes before she vanished, the alcohol in her car, those cryptic emails to professors. No other missing persons case has so perfectly tracked the evolution of how we consume true crime content. As we explore how Maura's physical disappearance created her transformation into true crime's most enduring mystery, we'll discover how her case fundamentally changed the relationship between missing persons investigations and the public that follows them. Join me for another odd, mysterious, and strange case here at Odd Mystery Stories. The night of February 9th, 2004, in rural New Hampshire began with a light coating of snow that turned roads treacherous. It's the kind of weather that makes even experienced drivers grip the wheel a little bit tighter. And somewhere, on Route 112, as darkness settled over the White Mountains, something happened that would spawn over 2 decades of questions. At approximately 7 p.m., Faith Westman heard a loud thump outside her house. When she looked out her window, she saw a black Saturn lodged awkwardly in a snowbank. The events that followed created a timeline filled with contradictions that still baffle investigators today. Westman called the Grafton County Sheriff's Department at 7:27 p.m., initially reporting seeing a man smoking a cigarette inside the vehicle. Her story later changed. Perhaps what she had seen was actually the red glow of a cell phone. This discrepancy became one significant piece of a complex puzzle. In a similarly puzzling turn of events, Butch Atwood, a local bus driver, returning from his route, spotted the stranded vehicle and stopped to help. He encountered a young woman shivering in the cold February night. Despite her visible distress, she refused his offer to call for assistance, insisting she had already contacted AAA, a claim later proven false when records show no such call was made. Concerned, yet respecting her wishes, Atwood continued home and called police himself at 7:43 p.m. The following minutes would become a focal point of a mystery that has persisted for over 2 decades. When police arrived at 7:46 p.m., just a mere 7 minutes after Atwood left Maura by her disabled car, she had completely disappeared. Her car was locked. The surrounding area was empty. The nursing student had vanished into the winter darkness as completely as a footprint erased by falling snow. Adding complexity to the timeline, a witness referred to as Witness A reported seeing a police SUV at the crash site at around 7:40 p.m., 6 minutes before police officially documented their arrival. This time discrepancy has sparked theories about potential police involvement, though no substantial evidence supports these claims. The physical clues at the scene only deepened the mystery. Police logs noted tire impressions in the snow beside the car, yet, remarkably, no distinct footprints were found in the area. The absence of tracks raises a haunting question. How does someone leave an accident scene without leaving evidence of their path? Search efforts began shortly after her disappearance, but weather conditions hampered tracking attempts. When dogs were eventually brought in, they followed Maura's scent approximately 100 yards east of the crash before losing it completely, like a candle's flame suddenly extinguished by the winter wind. This sudden end to her trail suggests she may have entered another vehicle, but whose? And why? Those critical 7 minutes, briefer than time it takes to make a cup of coffee, represents one of the most intensely analyzed time frames in missing persons history. In that fleeting moment, Maura Murray disappeared from a rural road with houses nearby, leaving almost no trace of her direction or intentions. The facts we can verify remain frustratingly few. A young woman crashed her car on a snowy night, briefly spoke with a bus driver offering help, and vanished before police arrived moments later. Everything beyond those basic elements, her reasons for being there, her final movements, and her ultimate fate, remains locked in speculation. As time passed, the prospects of finding answers diminished. Initial search efforts battled adverse weather. The delay in connecting her life in Massachusetts to her appearance in New Hampshire cost valuable investigation time. And as days stretched into years, the chances of discovering clear answers faded like footprints in melting snow. Time hasn't just obscured evidence in Maura's case, it's transformed her disappearance into something mythical. While approximately 600,000 people go missing in America every year, only a handful of cases capture our collective imagination for decades. What makes one young nursing student's vanishing act stand out from the thousands of others? The answer lies in the perfect storm of contradictions that creates an irresistible psychological puzzle. Before social media could amplify missing persons cases into viral phenomena, most disappeared from public consciousness within days. Local newspapers might run a story or two, perhaps a regional television station would air a segment, and then the story would fade, replaced by newer tragedies. Yet, Maura Murray's case emerged at a unique moment, just before the digital revolution transformed how we consume true crime stories. And her story has somehow endured, growing stronger with the passage of time. This persistence connects directly to the baffling contradictions in Maura's behavior. A promising nursing student with a bright future suddenly takes a series of deliberate, calculated steps. She withdraws money, emails professors about a fabricated family emergency, and packs belongings as if planning a trip. These careful actions contradict any theory of impulsivity, yet no clear destination or motive has ever emerged. Every detail creates another piece of a maddening puzzle. The rag in her car's tailpipe suggests either a practical fix for an exhaust problem or something more sinister. Her alcohol purchases point to someone planning to unwind rather than someone in distress. Each element exists in uncomfortable tension with the others, refusing simple explanation. At the heart of this fascination lies what psychologists call the vacuum effect, like a jigsaw puzzle missing its central piece, where the absence becomes more captivating than any present piece. Without a body, crime scene, or definitive evidence, Maura's disappearance creates a blank canvas that our minds desperately try to fill in. Each missing detail becomes an invitation to theorize, to potentially solve what professionals cannot. The setting amplifies this effect. The remote White Mountains of New Hampshire function almost as a character. Vast, secretive wilderness surrounding a dark, snowy road where a young woman vanished. The landscape potentially conceals answers beneath its rugged terrain, representing our collective fears of isolation and vulnerability. Consider Brianna Maitland, who disappeared in Vermont just weeks after Maura under similarly mysterious circumstances. Her car was found backed into an abandoned farmhouse, possessions still inside. Yet, Brianna's case received a fraction of the attention. Media researchers have documented how cases involving young, attractive, white women receive disproportionate coverage, sometimes called the missing white woman syndrome. As a college athlete and nursing student with an engaging smile in photographs, Maura represented the quote, perfect victim archetype that generates maximum public interest. What ultimately draws us to Maura's case is its perfect balance of the relatable and bizarre. She's familiar enough that we can imagine ourselves in her situation, yet her disappearance contains enough strange elements to create a persistent mystery. This creates a story that we can't look away from, one where we feel we might solve the puzzle if we just examine it correctly. The enduring fascination with Maura Murray's disappearance reveals something profound about human psychology. We're drawn to mysteries that seem solvable, but remain just beyond our grasp. And perhaps, more importantly, we're haunted by the fundamental questions her case forces us to confront. How can someone simply vanish without a trace in our modern world? The uncomfortable answer may be that it happens more easily than we'd like to believe. Maura's case just happens to be the one that makes us face this unsettling truth. Maura Murray's disappearance occurred at a pivotal moment in media history, just 5 days after Facebook launched in 2004. This timing positioned her case at the exact intersection between old and new media, creating a fascinatingly digital evolution that would transform how missing persons cases could capture public attention. When Maura first vanished, information traveled through traditional channels. Local New Hampshire newspapers printed grainy photos alongside brief articles about the nursing student who'd gone missing after a minor car accident. CNN picked up the story shortly afterward, bringing it to national attention with television segments that reached viewers across the country. These early reports followed the standard format: factual, limited in scope, and controlled by editorial gatekeepers who decided which details warranted coverage. Meanwhile, a communication revolution was brewing. As newspapers landed on doorsteps, early internet forums like web sleuths have become digital gathering places where curious citizens exchanged theories about Maura's disappearance. One early forum member recalled, "We were piecing together newspaper clippings, scanning them and sharing details that weren't making it to the evening news." These primitive online communities marked the beginning of something transformative: ordinary people participating in investigations that once belonged exclusively to law enforcement and journalists. By 2009, when New Hampshire officially added Maura's case to their cold case unit, social media had fundamentally altered information sharing. Facebook groups dedicated to finding Maura created spaces where family members, concerned citizens, and amateur investigators coordinated awareness campaigns. These groups actively sought to influence the case's outcome through collective action. Reddit emerged as another powerful force in Maura's digital story. Dedicated subreddits became virtual headquarters where users parsed every available detail with remarkable precision. Members organized information into timelines, maps, and evidence compilations that rivaled official case files in their comprehensiveness. What began as scattered newspaper clippings evolved into searchable, hyperlinked archives preserving every theory and contradiction. The digital landscape evolved dramatically in 2015 with the launch of the Missing Maura Murray podcast. This podcast format allowed deeper dives into the case and facilitated discussions among listeners. Noted one researcher studying true crime media was quoted as saying, "People could listen during commutes or while doing housework, making complex case details accessible in ways newspapers never could." This audio exploration introduced the case to a new generation hungry for long-form true crime content, with episodes dedicated to interviewing witnesses and examining specific theories. Media researchers tracking the phenomenon explain, the 2015 release of the Missing Maura Murray podcast sparked a renaissance of interest in the case, leading to the emergence of numerous podcasts and content focused on unsolved mysteries. What followed was remarkable. Dozens of podcasts, YouTube channels, not unlike this channel, and blogs examining Maura's disappearance from different angles, each attracting dedicated followings. Oxygen's 2017 documentary series, The Disappearance of Maura Murray, marked the case's return to mainstream media, but with a crucial difference. The documentary responded to an established online community, already deeply invested in the case, introducing it to an even broader audience and further expanding its reach and solidifying its status as a cultural phenomenon with the true crime community. Most recently, TikTok has transformed how Maura's story reaches new audiences. Julie Murray, Maura's sister, has gained hundreds of thousands of followers by sharing case updates and humanizing her sister beyond the mystery. Through short videos, she reaches younger audiences who might never engage with a documentary or a lengthy Reddit thread. The evolution of how we consume information about Maura's case mirrors broader shifts in media consumption. What began with passive newspaper articles and television segments has transformed into active participation across multiple platforms, creating an interconnected ecosystem of information sharing that continues to evolve today. Behind all the digital discussion and media coverage lies a fundamental question that has divided everyone, from seasoned detectives to armchair sleuths. What actually happened to Maura Murray? Four main theories have emerged from 20 years of investigation, each supported by compelling evidence, yet each containing holes large enough to drive a semi-truck through. These competing narratives reflect entirely different stories about who Maura was and what might have motivated her actions that February night. The voluntary disappearance theory. Maura deliberately walked away from her life to start fresh. Consider the evidence. She researched Vermont vacation rentals, withdrew cash, and headed north with carefully packed belongings. She fabricated a family emergency to buy herself time. This image of Maura as someone meticulously planning an escape initially captivated investigators. Yet, this theory falls apart under closer examination. Those packed nursing textbooks tell a different story about a dedicated student with clear career ambitions. Nursing requires extensive licensing and credentials, making it a puzzling choice for someone planning to vanish. Maura, revealed through her academic choices, seems inconsistent with someone plotting permanent escape. The accident/elements theory presents a starker picture, a frightened young woman wandering into the unforgiving wilderness, possibly disoriented or avoiding a DUI. Maura ventured from her car into the freezing darkness of the White Mountains. Hypothermia would have worked quickly. First confusion, then a paradoxical feeling of warmth, before finally succumbing to the cold. This theory explains why Maura has never been found, as the vast terrain could hide remains indefinitely. However, the absence of footprints leading from the crash site undermines this explanation. Defenders argue she may have walked along a packed roadway before entering the woods, leaving no trail. The Maura in this scenario seems less calculating and more desperate, a young woman making fatal mistakes in moments of panic. The suicide theory paints Maura in a troubled light. Friends noticed concerning changes in her behavior before she vanished. Her fabricated emergency and alcohol purchases suggest someone preparing for a final act rather than a new beginning. This version of Maura was battling inner demons that weren't immediately apparent to those around her. This explanation struggles to answer why no body has ever been recovered despite extensive searches, and why drive hours from campus to end her life in an unfamiliar territory. The woman who meticulously planned her nursing studies seems unlikely to choose such a haphazard end, making the suicide theory both implausible yet logistically perplexing. The foul play theory. This one was never ruled out by the investigators and presents the most chilling scenario. The 7-minute window between when Butch Atwood left her roadside and when police arrived provided an opportunity for someone to approach Maura and force her into another vehicle. Authorities have investigated several persons of interest, including a local man named Claude with a criminal history, and Maura's boyfriend, Bill Roos, who faced separate abuse allegations. This theory gains credibility from the complete absence of any trace of Maura since that night. A young woman, alone, on a dark rural road, represents the perfect opportunity for a predator. Law enforcement's classification of the case as, quote, suspicious suggests they continue to consider this possibility even more than 2 decades later. Physical searches using cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar have yielded nothing conclusive. The most experienced investigators remain divided, though many have gradually shifted toward the foul play scenario as the most probable explanation. The complete absence of any confirmed sightings or digital footprints since 2004 makes voluntary disappearance increasingly unlikely, leaving us with a haunting possibility that someone knows exactly what happened to Maura Murray that February night, while the rest of us can only theorize. More than 2 decades of dead ends might break most families, but for Julie Murray, each passing year without answers only strengthens her resolve. How do you fight for justice when the true crime community treats your sister's disappearance as entertainment rather than the tragedy it is? While armchair detectives debated theories online, Julie was transforming her grief into action, creating a playbook for families of missing people that's changing how these cases are handled. When Maura vanished in 2004, Julie found herself thrust into a nightmare no family manual prepares you for. She once said, "I remember staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring with good news that never came." Her initial shock evolved into determination as she realized her sister risked fading twice, physically from that snowy roadside and gradually from public memory as interest waned. As true crime content surged in popularity, Julie watched strangers dissect her sister's life, often distorting basic facts while pursuing sensational theories. The real Maura, a nursing student with dreams and complexities, was disappearing beneath the weight of speculation. "I had two choices," Julie explained in a rare vulnerable moment. "I could retreat from the pain of seeing Maura reduced to a mystery, or I could step forward and reclaim her story." She chose the latter, recognizing that in today's digital landscape, public attention drives investigative resources. In early 2024, Julie launched her Media Pressure podcast, focusing on first-hand accounts from people who actually knew her sister. "Time to give my missing little sister a voice in her own story," Julie explained. Within weeks, a new tip about Maura's disappearance arrived, a tangible proof of her strategic approach. Her Engage with Empathy campaign tackles how content creators approach real victims. Where previously she felt powerless watching strangers speculate about Maura, Julie now challenges the true crime community to honor victims as people rather than puzzles. This advocacy has sparked meaningful shifts, with creators modifying their approach after connecting with Julie's perspective. Maura was brilliant, determined, and so much more than her disappearance, Julie emphasizes. To ensure her legacy endures, the Murray family established scholarships in Maura's name. These scholarships serve dual purposes, honoring her academic achievements while creating regular media coverage opportunities that keep her case visible through positive associations. Behind the cameras and microphones, Julie has worked relentlessly with law enforcement. Her persistent pressure has led to a breakthrough in 2022 when the FBI created a Violent Criminal Apprehension Profile, otherwise known as VICAP, for Maura. This development allows multiple agencies to share information across jurisdictions, potentially connecting crucial dots in a case plagued by communication gaps and jurisdictional complications. Julie's effectiveness stems from understanding the modern media ecosystems. Rather than resisting public fascination with her sister's case, she channels it productively. Every interview I give, every podcast I join, they're all opportunities to remind people that behind this mystery is my sister, a real person we're still searching for, Julie says. Her journey represents a master class in modern advocacy, an emotional vulnerability paired with strategic action. From the devastating phone call about Maura's abandoned car to creating resources that help other families navigate similar nightmares, Julie has transformed herself from a grieving sister into a formidable advocate whose work extends beyond Maura's case to impact how we collectively approach missing persons investigations. After more than 2 decades since Maura's disappearance, Julie ensures that her sister's case remains both active in public consciousness and official investigations. She's accomplished this not through sensationalizing the mystery, but by humanizing the person at its center. Her persistent advocacy keeps Maura present in ways that her physical absence cannot erase. While Julie fought to keep her sister's memory alive, something unexpected was happening behind the scenes at police departments across the country. Imagine a world where missing adults were once dismissed with a casual, they probably just left town, until one case in the White Mountains forced authorities to question everything about their standard procedures. The lessons learned from Maura's disappearance now serve as a silent guardian for countless others who go missing. More than 2 decades ago, a missing adult report was typically met with institutional indifference, a sleeping giant of bureaucracy that rarely stirred for cases without obvious signs of foul play. Law enforcement waited 24 to 48 hours before taking action, assuming adults could disappear by choice. Cases involving people with potential troubles were filed away as probable voluntary departures, lost in a system not designed for ambiguous situations. Maura's disappearance awakened that giant. As public interest surged, law enforcement faced unprecedented scrutiny. Each delay and procedural limitation became visible to an invested audience. What began as a routine report evolved into a referendum on how authorities handle cases between voluntary departure and suspected crime. The New Hampshire State Police transformed their approach in this response. We now treat these cases with a focus on public engagement. A representative stated, "Community interest helps maintain pressure to continue searching for answers." This admission would have been unthinkable before Maura's case, when investigators were guarded against outside involvement. This revolution spread nationwide. The arbitrary waiting periods began disappearing. Resources previously reserved for cases involving children became accessible to adult disappearances. The shift wasn't immediate or universal, but the trend moved steadily toward taking all disappearances seriously from the outset. Julie's persistent advocacy created a new model for family involvement. Before, families waited passively for updates. Her approach, combining cooperation with authorities while building public awareness, demonstrated a more effective path. Today, family advocacy isn't seen as interference, but as a valuable partnership that keeps cases active and visible. This evolution brought complications. The explosion of amateur sleuthing presents challenges law enforcement continues to navigate. Departments have established protocols for managing the flood of tips generated by public interest. They've developed systems to separate credible leads from misguided speculation, cataloging, rather than discarding information, that might eventually form meaningful patterns. Digital transformation has further changed missing persons investigations. Departments now regularly monitor social media discussions about active cases, recognizing these platforms as both potential sources of information and barometers of public sentiment. Many agencies have dedicated digital teams engaging with online communities, sharing updates while correcting misinformation. For families of the missing, these changes represent a profound shift. The path Julie forged through determination now exists as an established route for others. Resources unavailable many years ago, from social media playbooks to advocacy networks, support families from the moment a loved one disappears. Perhaps most poignant is how these changes have altered the experiences of the missing themselves. People who vanish today enter a system more responsive, thorough, and persistent than the one Maura encountered. Their disappearances generate faster responses and more comprehensive searches. While we can never know if these improvements would have changed Maura's fate, they represent her enduring legacy, a system awakened from indifference, forever changed by one young woman's unsolved disappearance. I've just recently received an update that is currently breaking news on this story. Stephen Baldwin, who allegedly dated Maura at West Point prior to Army Lieutenant Bill Rausch, was found guilty on 32 of 39 felony charges in Ohio. The criminal trial against former Union County Humane Agent Stephen Baldwin has reached an official decision. Judge Daniel T. Hogan found Baldwin guilty of 32 felony crimes, including 1 count of bribery, 12 counts of telecommunications fraud, 4 counts of tampering with records, 11 counts of cruelty to animals, 1 count of grand theft of a firearm, 2 counts of grand theft, and 1 count of engaging in a pattern of corrupt activity. He was sentenced to 15.5 years for these crimes. Baldwin caused significant financial and psychological harm to his victims while searching for fame, fortune, and adulation in the dog rescue world, both nationally and internationally. He promoted himself as a gifted rehabilitator of aggressive dogs or reactive dogs, rescued from shelters or cruelty or neglected situations. The reason he has come under suspicion in Maura's case is because the FBI found his fingerprint in Maura's car. This is a still developing addition to Maura's story, but may in fact ultimately lead to the answers that her family so desperately has been seeking all these years. In the end, the White Mountains still hold their secrets about Maura Murray. The greatest revelation lies within us, those who've learned about and followed this haunting case. Her disappearance mirrors our deepest needs, our hunger for resolution, our discomfort with ambiguity, our desire to make sense of chaos. Imagine your sister vanishing without a trace. The true legacy of Maura's case lies within how it's transformed our approach to those at the center of these stories. Julie Murray's plea to engage with empathy reminds us all that behind every case file is a human with dreams, flaws, and a family suspended in limbo. After more than 2 decades, we understand that curiosity can blend with compassion. Through our collective memory, Maura teaches us lessons far beyond that snowy February night. Thank you for watching. Hey, thank you for joining me in another odd mystery. My name is Vince. If you enjoyed this story, you might also be interested in the story of the unsolved disappearance of Kelly Day Wilson. You'll find a link to that story in the upper right corner of your screen. Your support helps keep these stories alive, giving the affected families the hope they seek. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And for those who'd like to further support the channel, be sure to check out our online store for exclusive merch and more. I appreciate you. Thank you.